When you think of food preservation, you probably picture a nice, clean fridge or a pantry stocked with canned goods. But before refrigerators, people had to get a lot more creative and downright gross to keep their food from spoiling. Let's kick things off with the ancient Egyptians. We all know that they were pretty good at preserving bodies as mummies. But did you know they used some of those same techniques to preserve food? They'd pack meat in tons of salt, drying it out to the point that bacteria couldn't survive. Salt was their go-to for meats and fish, but sometimes they buried food in hot sand to dry it out faster. Imagine digging up some sun-baked fish from the sand. Definitely not the kind of beachside snack you'd want today. But wait, it gets worse. Alongside salt and sand, they also used natron, a natural mix of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate that could be deadly if ingested in large amounts. Preserved food might be edible if you didn't mind a little toxicity. Now let's head over to ancient Greece and Rome, where people used, well, whatever they could get their hands on. One popular method was soaking foods in vinegar, which was effective but left everything tasting pretty sour. But the really gross part, they sometimes used urine for preservation. Romans had a practice called urinatio, which involved fermenting urine until it became ammonia. Ammonia is powerful against bacteria, so it could actually keep food from spoiling for a while. Just imagine the stench that would have clung to their kitchens. Ancient Romans weren't only known for fancy banquets, they were also known for preserving food in literal human waste. In medieval Europe, things got creative and a lot more gross. Without refrigeration, people relied on methods that would make most of us gag. One popular technique was encasing meat in a thick layer of fat. Meat would be covered with animal lard or suet, which acted as a seal to keep bacteria out. Over time, though, the fat itself would start to turn rancid, and the meat underneath would smell awful. People would just scrape the rancid fat off, cook the meat, and call it dinner. And if that wasn't bad enough, let's talk about high meat. Some medieval folks believed that letting meat start to rot actually made it tastier. Yes, people would intentionally age meat by leaving it out in cool places, sometimes for weeks. They called it high meat because the smell was intense. It was like a medieval version of blue cheese, but with way less sanitation. By the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance, pickling became a major preservation method, but early pickling wasn't always what you'd expect. Today we think of vinegar-based pickles as safe and tart, but medieval pickling could include anything from animal blood to ash mixed with salt water. In colder regions, they'd pack fish in barrels with blood-soaked salt, or even seal it in a paste made of clay and straw. And if you were lucky, your preserved fish or meat would last a few months in this slimy, salty concoction. If you weren't, you'd open the barrel to a stench so bad it could clear a room, and food poisoning was always just a bite away. Now let's look at some traditional preserved foods that have survived over the centuries, even if they're still as gross as ever. Take Greenland's Kiviak, for example. This delicacy involves stuffing a seal with hundreds of small birds called auks, sealing it and burying it for months. After it's dug up, the fermented birds are eaten raw, feathers and all. In Iceland, there's Hakarl, fermented shark meat that smells so bad even locals warn tourists to hold their breath before trying it. The shark is buried, then hung up to dry in open air, developing a distinctive ammonia-rich stench over several months. And yet it's considered a delicacy. These revolting preservation methods might sound strange, but they were the only way our ancestors could keep food from spoiling and starving to death. So the next time you grab a soda from the fridge or snack on something freshly made, be thankful for modern technology and that you don't have to scrape rancid fat off your meat. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious, stay gross.